Hello, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Witch Cafe. And tonight we have Mr. John Ramirez here. I want to do a quick thank you to anybody joining in the chat. And if you're listening on Anomalous Podcast Network, thank you for listening there. And feel free to shoot me any feedback. And also, if you are listening on YouTube, you can support by giving me a like, a thank you. There's some links, in the description for both John and I and ways to support. And yeah, just thank you for your support. I said support like 90 times, but thank you. So tonight we have, Mr. John Ramirez, and most of you will know who he is. But if we have some random witches listening that might not know who he is, or some random people not knowing who he is. John, do you mind telling us a quick bio?
Sure. I served 25 years in CIA from 1984 to 2009. In the course of my day job, which has nothing to do with UAPs, UFOs, or ETs, I did encounter instances where such phenomena was presented as part of my day job, that I saw that the Russians tracked orbs with their radars. And that's just one example of some of the high strangeness that we deal with at CIA. And so I had a lifelong interest in this topic, even before I joined CIA from childhood. And I had many experiences from childhood all the way to just recently in my adult life. And so for me, I know a lot of people are interested in nuts and bolts about the craft. They just want to like show me the saucers and show me the bodies. But I am more about why are we seeing the craft to begin with? What are these orbs all about? What is the message that these visitors want to convey to us that might impact where we're taking the world? Because I think we do have free choice. I don't think they push us to do anything. It's our choice, but they're presenting us with those choices and perhaps a clue into, if we make the wrong choice, what could happen. And so that is like some of the nuclear missile incidents that we've read about that have been documented by Robert Salas at the Minuteman II silo he was at Maelstrom. Why were these missiles shut down? Or why were the missiles activated? I think there's a lesson in that for us. And so for me, as I said before, it's not about, like, to use the analogy of the delivery truck delivering a package at your front door. It's one thing to be interested in the truck and the driver. That's fine, but they left a package. And so is it like, oh, I want to know about the truck and I want to chase it down and talk to the driver? Or do we want to pick up the package? And some people just want to shake the package and like listen to it and see if it ticks or whatever. But I'm more interested in opening the package to see what is the gift inside. And for me, experiencers, others who are in that more esoterica, are more interested in the message rather than the means of delivery. And so that's where I'm at with the phenomenon.
Right. Yes, and people are really afraid to talk about that. We have the two camps of UFO Twitter, UFO world in general, where there is the whole, and it's kind of insulting when people say it. We were just talking about it, the woo, and then we have the side that is nuts and bolts, which is kind of funny because sorry, a lot of people say that, but at our last book club, I'm sorry, I keep thinking about it. It was brought up that people don't report nuts and bolts on UFO. So what the heck are you talking about with the nuts and bolts? They're not even, nobody said nuts and bolts. Like, they've seen nuts and bolts. So it's pretty funny that, oh my gosh, why is it slipping me who brought it up? My brain, Jay from Experiencer Group.
Yes.
So he brought it up to one of the guys in book club, and he's just like, it like blew his mind. He's like, wait, like, I've been saying nuts and bolts this whole time, and you're right. Like, UFOs are usually seamless. Like, from when people report them.
Yeah, it's just a human way of looking at stuff.
Yes.
And so I know Jay and I were actually part of this Exo Studies course with Dr. Sean Esbjorn Hargens. And
he's amazing.
Yes, he is. And there was a week where we talked about nuts and bolts. That was actually the theme for a week, and it's mostly about the metallic craft. and how there's a lot of interest in the metallic craft and where did that come
Right.
from? Because I mean, if you go back to Roswell, it's all about this craft crashed,
Yeah.
and perhaps those nuts and bolts weren't tight enough that caused it to crash.
Right.
To me, it's unusual. You know, like if it's supposed to be this exotic advanced propulsion technology using anti-gravity, why the hell did it crash? You
Well,
know, I
you
mean, that's
yeah.
something that like human built airplanes do. And I don't know if
Right.
that's a clue into what Roswell really was about or not. I leave that up to folks with NDAs that know about exactly
Right.
what Roswell was about.
Yeah,
And
there's
to
a lot of
yeah,
speculation for sure.
a lot of speculation. And to preface that, I never had an NDA at CIA that dealt with anything to do with this at all. It just came up as part of my day job. And so those with NDAs, they know more about what happened, but they're not at liberty to discuss it.
Oh, right.
Fortunately for me, I refused the NDAs about anything to do with this when it was offered to me. I just did not want to go there because why would I need to know in a classified sense what I already know
Right.
personally, what I've experienced personally? So those of us who are experiencers, we almost already know what's behind the scenes, the things that the
Right.
government can't talk about. And that
Yeah.
is the experience part of it. That is part of everything. So if you just deal with like craft and bodies, you're just looking at a small sliver of that magnificent spectrum known as the phenomenon.
Right.
And I think Jim Simivan recently, when he appeared on Coast to Coast, and I was the second guest, he talked about his experiences. And wasn't that an amazing discussion he had with George Knapp, another CIA officer,
Yes.
saying, I'm going to talk about my experiences, and here's what I can share.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it should go, that conversation, because once we add the experiences to what we see as craft or orbs or these unusual things in the sky, we get a fuller understanding of what really is going on and perhaps a clue into why the government can't talk about it. Because can you imagine any president getting up on the podium and say, oh, you know, they're visiting us and people have experiences in government, you know, and we have
Yeah.
experiences about being taken aboard craft and all of that that goes on with that. I mean, that's just a bridge too far right
Yes,
now.
and they even mentioned, like, the biological effects, right, in some of the language, so we know that people have been physically affected by this, so and then we have Gary Nolan doing his research, and he has a lot of information about that too, so we can't ignore it for much longer. And right now, everybody's sticking with military because it's easier to document, like, you were in this job position, you needed this sort of vetting or clearance, so you're more, for the world, you're more easy to believe or you're more credible. And then there's the rest of us that just, got our minds blown at the age of 4 or 5, and we're just
Mhm.
like, we don't really need too much, but it would be nice for people that do need it, that are experiencers to have that, that, "Hey, like, this did happen, you're not
Mhm.
crazy."
Mhm.
Even though you know you're not crazy, you still feel crazy sometimes because we just you just said, it's not really when we were talking before we came on, you were saying this isn't really, like, something you talk around the dinner table, and I was like, "Yeah, not at playground with other moms either." So, it's
Yeah,
like it's
right.
like people are like, "So this crock pot recipe is great. This is a sheet pan recipe," and I'm like, "Hey, how about them UFOs?" And, like,
Right.
the world's like an old
Uh-huh.
movie where, like, the record goes, and
Right. Yeah.
everybody looks at you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you brought up a good point too, and you had basically said, how can we might not even be able to understand the what without the who, right? So,
Mhm.
we might and this has been talked about by whistleblowers and people that supposedly worked kind of like with these craft that were these crash retrieval materials. You're like, well, we have it, but we can't figure out what it does completely. Or, you might need to be linked with a certain consciousness to understand how it works.
Mhm. Mhm.
And another thing that kind of blows my mind is people are expecting like these weird, elements that we've never seen, but you know, it could be the elements and, in different isotopes or different ratios or mixtures is what people are starting to notice. But that's kind of like, to me, it kind of bothers me. They're like, oh, well, it was just a piece of aluminum in the end. I'm like, yeah, but like, did you do, did you? measure the spectrum? Did you put it, did you measure the isotope rates and all that stuff? So a lot of people are doing that now, and I know people have been doing it for a long time, but people are just starting to talk about it finally. But let's dive into the experiences, because I think that a lot of people have asked you a lot of, like, technical questions.
Mhm.
And I do think that your slideshow that you did with Project Unity was super cool. I've watched it a couple times, and you had mentioned that nothing that you're saying is classified. So that's
Yes.
very interesting. And but then you're talking from an experiencer standpoint that kind of ended up in a position where you were able to observe more about the phenomenon, whether you intended that or not. Something intended it for you, whether it be, people talk about soul contracts or fate or destiny or divine planning. So you had your first experience when you were 5, right?
Well, yes,
Or-
actually, not an experience, but the first message I got was at
Okay.
age 4,
Oh, wow.
um, when I looked through my first telescope. And looking through the first telescope, seeing the stars and the moons, and maybe some of those stars were actually
Mhm.
planets, I felt an affinity toward what I was seeing, that this was where I came from. And
Yeah.
even at that young age, it was a feeling that it belonged out there, not on Earth, and that perhaps I got left behind on Earth. And so, even though I had a earthly family, that my real family was out there. And that was at a very young age, of age 4. And isn't it amazing that lifelong experiencers, they usually say it happened when I was very small,
Yes.
and that seems to be a common age, like
And
4,
also that
maybe 5.
what you mentioned, sorry not to interrupt, but I want to say it before I forget it. What you mentioned about feeling like you're in the wrong place, or
Exactly.
maybe you're not even supposed to be in a body at some point. So, but yes, go on. So you had your first when you looked through this telescope,
Mhm.
you were just
Yes,
like,
and so the subsequent experience to that was, um, when I had, I guess it was a dream, but it was a recurring dream of being led into a house for a medical examination. Um, and this could have been a what's known as a cover experience. That for me to process it,
mm,
it had to be like, a woman who led me to this house, and a doctor and a nurse who were very kind and wanted to examine me. And this was a recurring kind of dream, where sometimes it was on the first floor, sometimes on the second floor. But in each time, they assured me that they meant no harm, that you're fine. We just want to examine you. And I remember the examination. It wasn't any kind of intrusive examination that I remember. It was
right.
mostly, we just want to see how you're doing.
Yeah.
And I remember, mostly it was like a traditional, like, cursory examination. When you go to the doctor office, there's usually someone, perhaps a nurse practitioner, RN, would take your blood pressure,
Yeah.
listen to your heart. It was that type of experience. Nothing intrusive, nothing scary, and being dressed again and being let out of the house. Now, when I asked my mom about this, she said, no, there's never been any time where I took you to any kind of doctor like that, especially
Wow.
the house I described, which was like the kind of houses that I remember when I was very small.
Mm.
I'll call them Victorian style houses, A-frame with
Right.
a turret on one side.
Yeah.
But in the town
I
I
love
lived
that
in,
those houses, by the way.
yeah, I do too. And so, put it in context, at that age, I was like 5, or I guess I was 6 years old, and that's like 1959 for me. And so it's conceivable at 1959, there were houses built like at the turn of the century in the 1900s
Right.
that had that style. And so that
Yes.
was the style of house that I associated with. And we lived in an older house like that, which was back then not that old. You
Okay.
subtract 50 years from 2022, and you get a house in the 70s,
Right.
basically. So it's not like really old.
What part
Um,
of the country was this, if you don't mind me
this
asking?
is Petersburg, Virginia,
Oh, okay, yeah, there's some gorgeous houses
20
out there.
miles south of Richmond.
Arizona doesn't have a lot of houses like that. So
No, nothing. It wouldn't have, the heat out here, those houses would have
right.
not stood for long. And before that, I should say before that, it was when I was living with my aunt and uncle when my mother was still in Japan. She was learning English and she was going to join us later. But I lived with my aunt and uncle, and that's when I saw my first craft, I guess what I call it. That it was a silvery craft that wasn't saucer shaped, but it was more oblong, and it's more like not exactly a football, but I would say like a rugby ball, if you know what that looks like. So it wasn't so pointy so much at the end and narrow. It's more like
Right.
chubby in the middle.
Okay.
It was
Yeah.
wider and pointy at that end. But I saw it rise out of the tree line out in the distance, and I pointed to it with my finger. I said, "Look," to my playmates and my cousins. They didn't see it at all. They did not see it. I saw it, and it drifted off and went away. Later, when I did some research as to what was there was a Nike Hercules base. Those are the missiles that protected many cities
Oh.
in the United States during the Cold War, and some of them were nuclear capable. They had nuclear warheads designed to shoot down Russian bombers at the time, which was the big threat. So there could be an association with the fact that there might have been nuclear weapons stored there, and these nuclear tipped missiles that attracted this particular craft down. But then I had the house experience, and then going to a bookstore at a five and dime, which back then I guess we call them dollar stores now.
Yeah.
Inflation. But the five and dime, I saw a book with illustration of two primitive humans and the woman holding a modern looking baby up in the sky, and its saucers beaming lights
Ooh, I love it.
down toward these two primitive human parents. And that, again, there was a message. The message was, this is who you are. This is where you came from. We made you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was so profound. It gives me shivers just to think about it.
Yeah, me
And
too. I kind of got like this weird, like in my
oh
face, like a
yeah,
flush in my face.
and I wanted this book. My parents, they may hesitate to buy me toys, but if I wanted a book, no hesitation whatsoever.
That's how my grandma was. So,
Yeah, yeah. But the book disappeared when my mom came around. It wasn't more than a few minutes. I got my
oh
mom and
man.
said, "I want this book," and it's gone. And I left it in a place where I knew I could find it.
Yeah.
And there weren't that many people there rummaging through the books. I mean, none that I can remember, but it was gone. And
Yeah.
from there, I had more of the traditional, what I call traditional, but non-experiences were still considered unconventional. But for me, it was like being underground and being led underground in some kind of cave setting by smaller beings. I guess you can call them grays, but they didn't have the large almond-shaped eyes. They had round
Okay.
eyes, and they were leading me down. And I wanted to get away, but they, said, "Don't worry, we won't hurt you. You need to come with us," and leading me through this cave. The other experience I had growing up, and now I'm becoming a teenager, was having to plant. For some reason, I was obsessed with sunflowers. I said, I need to plant sunflower seeds. And I got my parents to get me some sunflower seeds to plant. And I planted them outside my bedroom door. And these sunflowers eventually, seeds grew into flowers.
Yeah.
And the reason why is I felt like they need to find me. They may not be able to find me. They need to
Oh,
find me so they can take me home. And it's not that, a lot of skeptics say, oh, that's because you had a terrible childhood and just a way for you to cover up your terrible
right.
childhood that you want to get away. It was nothing like that. I grew up in a very loving family.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
it was none of that family trauma going on whatsoever. I just
Yeah.
felt this need to have them come for me. And sure enough, one night they came for me. And I remember these arms grabbing me out of my bed, went somehow through the screen window and up into this craft where I was led by another being that was taller and carried in this being's arms, and seeing the walls of this craft turn coincident with the way we were walking in a circular fashion. So I know it was like more of like a saucer shape and being placed on an examining table. And I have no memory of the examination. But the following morning, I had markings on the lower part of my body in the groin area. So what that might have been, I don't know. There have been other experiencers who've said that genetic material was taken from them.
Right.
And so that could have happened. But I don't know. I just had that, I guess you would call it an artifact of that experience physically on my body. But it went away. So it's not like it was a permanent thing. It was not scarring or anything
Oh,
that was
yeah.
damaging. It just went away.
That's
And it,
interesting that you say that, because one of my sleep paralysis experience after I had my first, sighting and then seeing the being in my room, I had sleep paralysis from that point on, with, angels or demons in, presences, and I was Catholic, so that could have explained a lot, but, almost like hives. I would get these hives and I grew up with eczema. I was an eczema baby, so there's like, "Oh, it's just eczema."
mhm,
But they were like almost like you had, like, an allergic reaction, and people get hives all over my body, and they would just, like, throw me in an oatmeal bath and be like, "Oh, good luck," you know? So
yeah,
but it was after these it would be after a sleep paralysis that had grays in it or something, so it's
mhm,
interesting that you mentioned that because it's something that I don't tell people because, again, they'll be like, "Oh, well, it's just a rash." You know what I mean?
right. Yes. Um, the the physical manifestations seem to go from one extreme to the other, and some have traumatic experiences. And for me, it's like I wouldn't say no big deal. I mean, it was profound for me to have the experiences I've had, but they were not as malevolent as what other people have experienced. They're not exactly benevolent. It just happened. They weren't harmful to me in the long run, in my experiences. Um, Following that experience, I've had a dream that I was in a place of light beings. There were light beings everywhere. I was a light being, and I really loved where I was at.
Yeah.
I felt like I was home.
Yeah.
This is where I belong. I finally made it. This is where I'm supposed to
Yes.
be. But then a voice over my shoulder, I think it was my left side, said to me, "It's time for you to go back because you have work to do. You haven't finished your
Yeah.
work." And I said, "I don't want to go back." So, no, you need to go back, but you get to pick who you are going to be this time. And I was shown like a vast plain of little, I would call it like little eggs in a giant egg carton, that as far as I can see. And it was like swirling lights in these little spheres. And who do you want to be? And I looked into each one and saw their lives from beginning to end, from birth to death. And I saw one that resonated with me, and it said, "This is who I want to be." And they said, "Okay, go. You have work to do. Do your work. Go." And
Ready,
I
set, go.
ready, set, go. But I immediately remember being born. I remembered
That's
the birth
insane.
experience. And so that I didn't connect that for a long, long time as to what it might have meant. But the synchronicity there that sent chills up and down my spine. Um, and I would have mentioned it if we had more time with George Knapp, but someone called in Art Bell back in the day and related in open lines when anybody can call, talk about anything. A
Yeah, I
woman
remember
called,
him, yeah.
yeah, a woman
My
called
aunt
and
used to listen to that late at night, so she
right.
was kinda like one of the only people that I would sneak into her room, and, because I felt like she believed me with my experiences,
Hmm.
and, she didn't say yes or no, but she listened very lovingly, and then I remember sneaking into her room one night, she's like, "Okay, just don't tell, you have to go
Right.
back in a little bit to your bed," and
Yeah.
she was listening to it, and it was the people that were calling in, so
Right, exactly. Well, one of those call-ins was a woman who related the exact same experience and said, "Art, I want to share with you a dream I had." And she related the voice on one's shoulder telling her she had work to do and she had to go back, being shown this vast array of like life. possibilities of life, and her picking her life current and being born. She had that exact memory, and my spine was tingling. I mean, I was just
Yeah.
totally electric, and trying to call in, forget it.
Yeah.
Just you're not going to get in. I mean, it's so lucky if you get in. But I've always wanted to reach out to her because she had this similar experience, and so later I learned about twin flames and twin souls. But
Yes,
sometimes
yes.
you incarnate on Earth with someone else who is your spiritual twin somewhere. And I felt like she must be my spiritual twin, my twin flame or twin
Yeah, that
soul.
makes sense. Because
Um,
people misinterpret that. They think that they're supposed to be like married to their twin flame, or they're supposed to be best friends with their twin flame, or even like give birth to your twin flame.
mhm,
People think they're supposed to be of close proximity, but it's actually from what I'm like when I'm talking to people about it, like not on here, I haven't talked about it yet, but when I'm talking to other friends in the world, they not a lot of people have their twin flame on Earth at the same time as they are, which is super crazy to
mhm.
me. So you think she was your twin flame? Have you and you haven't been able to find
I've
her? Or you
never
haven't
been able to locate her. I mean, how would I? It's just
Yeah,
a voice,
especially yeah,
using a first name.
right.
East of the Rockies,
Yeah,
first
yeah.
time caller, like, I don't
Mhm.
know where she was
'Cause
calling
even
from.
he probably couldn't locate him at that
Hmm.
time,
Yeah,
it was like a telephone line, like, you know?
yeah. So that was a profound experience that got linked later when I
Oh,
had,
wow.
and your audience would know who Dolores Cannon
Oh, absolutely.
was, and I had QHHT sessions, and I actually in the QHHT session with this like sort of like buried in my memory. I had the front part of that of me dying, and then um, seeing. It wasn't a tunnel of darkness. It was more like, I would say, grayness. It wasn't completely dark. It was just gray, and a feeling of movement I had
Mm.
at my death, and seeing two faint light beings come around to the left and right to escort me home.
Oh, wow.
And then, having been escorted home, it was a world of these light beings, and having that same experience, linking it all of a sudden. Oh my gosh, that experience was the precursor to that dream I had as a teenager.
Wow.
So that QHHT session occurred as an adult,
Yes,
and so that linked it together.
that's very interesting that you and very cool that you were able to link that because you had mentioned and Nikki, I'm gonna get to your question in a minute, but, you had mentioned in one of your interview it was when you did the slideshow, you had mentioned that, pieces of the puzzle, right? Like, so many people with experiences from minor I don't wanna say minor experiences, but experiences like, I saw something that freaked me out. I know it was sentient, it was in the sky, and that maybe that's the end of their experience, but they only have that piece of the puzzle, and then there's people that are, like, lifelong experiencers that have all these weird, like, memories and thoughts and experiences that they know are real, but they can't like, as you had said before, you can't the puzzle picture on the box. You can't see that, but you have all the corners, but you can't see the rest of the puzzle. So, I feel like at least you got those 2 puzzle pieces to, like, click because that was,
Yes.
when you had that dream, the first one, you were probably like, "What in the world?" Or that memory come back, you must have been like, "Okay, like, I was being born," but there's a continuation, there was a before that, so,
There was
um
many befores, many,
Oh,
many befores.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I tell people that, they think I'm crazy, so I don't bring it up often, but
I don't have any qualms about bringing it up. I've had many experiences like that through HHT sessions, through mindful meditation. I've had previous lifetimes, and they were not all human lifetimes. There
Yep.
were times when I was another species from another planet. So to me, that's not unusual when people say that. And so, oh yeah, I've had that as well. And it seems to be a common theme that
It
some
really
people
is.
think if I'm male, I'm always going to have a male experience, and these previous lifetimes, I've had experiences
Mhm.
as female as well.
Yeah,
It's just that
absolutely.
my core belief is that this corporeal body you know as John Ramirez is a host to a sentient light being with whom we have a symbiotic
Mhm.
relationship. And when we die, the corporeal goes away. But this light
Right.
being is eternal and goes back to its home and may return either back in this form as a human or some other place. Um, because the part of the QHT session was when I experienced these light beings, my practitioner asked them what they're called. And I stumbled with that. I knew it started with a LY.
Oh.
It says LY something Lycean, Lycurians, light it
Mhm.
up, and it was Lyrans,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
Lyrans. And so I resonate with Lyrans and some resonate with Pleiadians and some with
Yes.
Arcturans. There's a whole panoply of these light beings, but at the core of it is they're non-corporeal and they want to experience life as a corporeal being. So that's
Right.
why they dwell in us and other beings as well. They just want to experience what is life like to have emotions, to feel love, to have the full gamut of being this person. Because there are energy, they're pure energy. They're
Yeah.
manifestations of unconditional love, and that's what I get from these experiences. That they're unconditional love, and they're trying to teach us unconditional love for everyone, for everything in the universe. It's just the energy of the universe is unconditional love. That's what drives everything. That's why the experience is so magnificent when you have these um, this relationship with your inner self, and when you start mindful meditation and going back to the chakras, when you know
Mhm.
how to um, send your energy down through your chakras to the core of the earth, and then to actually, I thank the earth for giving us this beautiful planet, and then I say, I'm so sorry for what we've done to you. I get very emotional about that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
that we've harmed you, but we'll do better and bring it back, to your body, to your heart, throat, third eye, crown, and send it out to the universe, because that's where we're from. And just welcome.
Absolutely.
I just want to say hi. Just
Yes.
just phoning home, and
Yep.
then
I don't
bring
want
bring it
anything
back.
from you. Just
Yes,
hello. Maybe I want to see
right.
you again.
And then bring it back, and that's
Yeah.
when I go into a very deep meditative state where I don't have a better word for downloads, but I get inspirations, or what people
Yes.
call downloads. I get inspirations of messages, and then it's an opportunity to ask questions. So
Absolutely.
I think it's more than just a passive experience. It can be active, to ask questions to the universe. You can manifest things to the universe. I think we're all like creators in some way, that you do manifest your own destiny. You have free will, but in a way, you kind of manifest what you want, and you can do what's known as cosmic orders. Like you order
Yeah.
something from a restaurant, you order
Yeah.
something from the cosmos, and that's how we got this house I'm living in. My wife did a similar thing about manifesting the house we wanted to buy, and she listed everything she wanted, did a mindful meditation with dancing and singing, because she likes to dance and sing, to the universe. And she did it on a Wednesday night, and Thursday morning our realtor called and say, hey, there's the house on the market.
Yep.
It's not on the market yet, but you need to see it because it'll go quick. And everything on that list was in the house,
I
everything we
I believe
wanted.
it. I believe it. A lot of
So
people
yeah,
are doing that, the intention setting and
mhm.
manifestation techniques like that. Not enough people are doing it because they don't believe it, but, I believe it. That's how I got my wedding dress. Like, the lady's like, "Oh, this just came in today," and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" My friend was
Oh
like
yeah.
she went with me to try it on. She's like, she's like, "You described this dress to me, like, the other day," and I was like, "I know, because it's what I wanted," and she's like, This just came in yesterday," and it had, like she had to take it out of the bag, no, you know? So, sometimes we don't realize we're doing it either, which can work
Right.
both ways, right?
Yeah, and I just think the synchronicities are so beautiful when they happen. That we live in just this beautiful universe, and when you're resonating with the universe and in sync with your wavelength, and that resonance is strong, wonderful things can happen. And part of that learning how to meditate mindfully is to find your resonant frequency, find it, and then tune into it, because we all have different resonant frequencies. And it doesn't mean one is better than the other, it's just different.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
and what I tell people is like, this probably kind of dates me, but I don't know if people actually listen to the radio on the air. But if you look at all the FM radio stations broadcasting on the air, they're all there. And that's the full spectrum of the experience. But you choose your radio station. And just because you're listening to like classic rock or classical or country and western or whatever your
Right.
favorite music is, it doesn't mean that these other stations aren't there as well. They're there, but
Right.
we're tuning in. And so by broadening the spectrum of accepting it all, making it more broadband, you get the full impact of all what the universe offers.
Yes.
And then you might find affinity toward a certain part of that spectrum from which you can grow. And so I've been doing that most of my adult life, and it's been very fulfilling for myself as well as my wife to do that.
Yeah, you seem very, at peace and very, you seem the way you talk about your wife, and I thought it was, um I thought it was awesome when I was asking you for an interview in February, you're like, "Any day but the 14th," and I was just
That's right.
like, he so I was like, that's so, not a lot of people, like, do that anymore. Do you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
and some people are cynical about, the whole Valentine's Day thing, but the way you talk about her, she sounds like a lovely person, and, I'm very glad that you guys have each other, but it sounds like you've been manifesting what you wanted, and you seem very at peace, like, when you talk to people and they're just very angsty feeling, or you can tell
Mhm.
they're very, disheveled or whatever, you seem, like, very, 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 like, peaceful. I don't know any other way to put it, so it's great that, you're talking about this, because not enough people ask you about this sort of thing. I do have an audience question, and it's from my friend Nikki, who is also an experiencer. I've known her for a very long time, and she found an implant. So
Mhm.
she's asking if you've ever been checked for implants, and I know that there's some weirdness with your medical records, right?
Mhm.
So, have you been knowledgeably checked for implants?
Well, no, I haven't. But having said that, I do know I have an implant. And I know that from light workers that are friends of mine, my own light worker practitioners. They told me that I had an implant because they can hear it. So, oh my gosh, it's like I can hear it. And one light worker, my implant didn't resonate with her quite well, and so she started getting headaches, like a physical manifestation of a headache,
Oh,
along
wow.
with another gentleman who is very much an empath that got a headache from me. So I had to let um, my companion know. And so here's where it gets really strange. There is someone, an entity that is with me all the time. They're on my right shoulder, a little bit behind me. I sense it as a female companion. I can sense feminine energy from her, and she's more of a protector, not a controller.
Yes.
When I say this, people think, "Oh, your mind is being controlled." No, no, no,
No, no,
no.
because people have talked about guardian angels for how
Right.
long? This
Yes,
is just
exactly.
it's an energy stream or energy frequency, and you just aren't calling it an angel.
And it's some divine feminine energy that is more protective. And I had to let her know, please, I am not being threatened by these other people, please, be more quiet. And when I did that, it went away. It went away. They didn't have that headache. When I met them again, they didn't have any headaches. And the light
Yes.
worker told me, "Oh yeah, it's very definitely a feminine, divine feminine presence with you, and it's been there ever since I can remember. That it's a very protective, kind of nurturing entity."
Yes, and a lot of people talk about that as like their guides or their angels or their guardian angels. You had talked about a cover experience earlier, and the more I'm learning from other experiencers and some of this terminology, I'm like, my first experience after seeing those, I've had angelic experiences as far as I can remember. So I'm not confused anymore. But there was a point even earlier last year where I was like, that was not an angel. It was a glowing human shape, and it had I when they show up, they're just glowing, and then it turns into this physicality, but maybe that's because I've seen angels and I want it to look
Mhm.
like an angel, so it makes sense. Cover experience, like you said. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But I have a good question from James from Engaging the Phenomenon. He's an amazing guy. I don't know if you've seen his channel.
Oh
I
yes,
just love James.
I've
Yeah. Oh, you've
connected
been
with
okay. Yeah, I
James.
just love
Yes.
James. So he said he has a question. Was John part of the Kit Green Nolan Experiencer study?
Not formally, no. Um, when I asked CIA for my medical records, I was suggested that perhaps that would be an opportunity to make myself known to Kit Green, since he was also CIA, and he has dealt with many of the paranormal aspects, the metaphysical aspects of what CIA does. For example, remote viewing. And so that might be an opportunity when I do get my medical records to send it to him, and I know how to contact him. So that's a very good suggestion of being part of that study. One thing I don't want to happen is I don't want my implant to be removed.
Yes, yes.
Um,
My friend says the same thing. She's like, it's there, and I'm fine with it being there
right,
because you
right.
know.
It's not a controller. It doesn't control me. For me, it's like it's reporting somewhere
Right.
and it protects me. That's my perception of it.
Yes, that makes sense. And like you had said before, they're checking in. And I often with like even so I had said I had these horrible, scary experiences with grays. Traumatic, all this horrible stuff happened. And it was just horrible because I was young at the time and little and I didn't understand it. And now that I'm looking back, it's almost like and I had one explain it to me telepathically in an experience. um, Basically, we're just doing our job. Like, we're not trying to hurt you. We're just
Mhm.
sampling, which brings up the whole, hybridization thing.
Yes.
But before we get off on that, because that's going to be another, that's a something I do want to ask you tonight. I want to
Mhm.
ask you about physical symptoms. You said she could kind of sense your friend could sense your implant after, and I think I actually this is might have been why I messaged you initially before I even asked you to come on here that after my first experience, I developed tinnitus.
Mhm.
The ringing was so bad at one point where I was young. I was not past first grade, and my first experiences was kindergarten because I remember the teacher. I remember telling my bestie in kindergarten, and everybody laughed and told me I was lying and all this stuff. But I remember there was this like high pitched ringing and it's always there, and it
Mhm.
changes. It's not and I have had tinnitus experiences where it's the whooshing,
Yes.
but this is almost like it changes, and when they're near, and I know I'm gonna have an experience, and I don't know if this falls into high strangeness, but there's, like, this weird, like, feeling in the air, and I
Mhm.
get, like, the ringing gets louder and the, pressure comes.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
I don't know if that have you had any physical experiences like that?
It's interesting you mentioned this high pitch ringing or frequency
And
in
sometimes it sounds
the
like Morse
ear.
code, like techno Morse code is
Mhm.
the best way I can explain it.
I have experienced something like that, and it sort of like starts at a very low amplitude and rises in volume and then stays for maybe a minute or two and then decreases if volume goes away. I haven't correlated that to any other experience other than this physical manifestation of ringing. But this had occurred to me throughout my life, and even before I started going to live concerts.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Like, obviously, you
Yeah,
leave like a rock concert in your teenage
mhm.
years, and
Yeah,
you got the ringing. But
right,
this is too early for that. Like, nobody was
exactly.
taking me to a metal concert when I was 5.
Hmm.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It
right.
wasn't like we weren't even allowed to go outside because we had gang activity. So like
Mm.
it's we weren't outside listening to loud things. My grandparents pretty much raised me, so it's not like that they were loud people. Like my grandpa was a very quiet stoner, so he's
Hmm. Hmm.
hippie Woodstock guy. So
Right,
um yeah, the rings, people want to write that off just like they want to write off the sleep paralysis
right.
and the dream experiences, and things like eczema as hives when it's
Yeah,
not
right.
eczema.
Yeah.
Eczemas and patches, it's not gonna be like boom, like
Hmm.
hives,
Hmm.
and really random, just after an experience kind of thing. So yeah, so you had that before metal concerts, and you haven't been able
Well,
to
I
leave
didn't go to
them.
metal concerts. Believe it or not, I'm more into the '80s goth industrial scene.
Oh, like
And I
who?
used to go to
Who's your favorite?
Susie and the Banshees, The
Oh, okay.
Cure,
Oh, I
Bauhaus,
love The
Joy
Cure.
Division,
Okay, I
all
love
those
you even more
bands.
now because I love that kind of music. Like I was born in 1984, so it's not like I got to like hang out with my friends to that music, but I feel like I've always just loved it. Maybe because like my dad or mom would listen to it, or whoever was around me.
Mhm.
You gotta love The Cure and you gotta love Joy
Oh, yeah.
Division. I
Oh, yeah.
love them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I got to see these bands, in Washington, DC. We had a very vibrant music scene. And for example, at the 930 Club, when it was actually at 930 F Street Northwest in DC, go to the back bar, and there was none other than Mr. Foo Fighter himself, right there, sharing a beer with
Oh
him.
wow.
And so I got to meet um, a lot of people who, at that time, he was playing in a local hardcore band, and then later, um, joined Nirvana, and then later had Foo Fighters. So I got to
Yeah.
meet him.
He's a great musician, and it's very sad what happened to Kurt Cobain, but
Yeah,
Dave Grohl is he seems like a really cool, open, down to earth guy. So
and
that's pretty cool.
when Nirvana first played at this club, it was basically a $5 ticket.
That's insane.
And
And
yeah, I
now
had VIP passes where I can invite myself and like one other person. And I was single back then. So what I would do is get my VIP pass and say, "Oh, she looks interesting. Hi, get out of line. I got a VIP. Come on." And
oh
go
my
walk
god.
right to the front. And so I was a very popular guy back then.
I just get like the now this is really gonna get off topic, but the scene in Wayne's World where they're like with their
Mhm.
past. So
Yeah.
but actually James is like all full of the good questions tonight. This might be a good segue into the hybridization stuff that
Uh-huh.
and the collecting of genetic material stuff
Yeah.
that I kind of wanted to talk to you with. Oh my gosh, I can't think. Talk to you about. Sorry. 2 and a 3-year-old, 2 and a 4-year-old. I'm at the end of the night, sometimes my brain just stops. So the question is the hotel meeting discussing
Mhm.
hybridization. Was anyone from NIDS present or on the sign in the list, like John Alexander, Kit Green, Hal Puthoff, Jacques Vallée, Colm Kelleher, and Robert Bigelow, he's got, and Ron
No,
Pandolfi.
none of them. Um, it was sponsored by a science office, and the person who gave the briefing had access to CIA's classified historical records. And so this person went back and discovered this information of CIA's involvement into UFOs and briefed us. But there were none of the what you would consider principles that you know of in ufology present at the time. But who was there were these academic types, these people with .edu addresses. I did not recognize any of them. And I know Ron Pandolfi. I met him before. I know who he is. And the other folks, I've never met personally, but Ron I have met. They were not there, but the two officers I did recognize was an officer who was senior to me from my parent office, which was Weapons Intelligence, Non-Proliferation, and Arms Control. That office, and that office, coincidentally, the predecessor offices in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and 80s, 90s, they were involved with UFO research at CIA. So this was a very senior officer there, and also a scientist that was there that I was working with, mostly in visualization, scientific visualization. So we were doing like 3D visualization, you wearing data gloves and goggles in the 90s when no one else was doing it. And I had
very cool.
I had a room bathed in electromagnetic energy, magnetic energy. So when you walk in with this stuff on, it knows your presence, and the computer software would like then interact with data so that you can touch data, move it around. And
kind of like in the the futuristic movies where you see the people doing the air computer, like kind of,
right. Yeah, we were doing that like 25 years ago.
They know so much more about us than most of us know about us and how our energetic fields work. I mean, like we might know, like I know from like a energy work standpoint and from studying chakras and that sort of thing, but they know how to do this with technology, and the general public doesn't get any advantages of this or any knowledge about it. We just the majority of the general public just thinks that, we're just these consumers, which we are. But if they knew about their energetic qualities and their abilities to interact with these sorts of technologies, then I feel like people would be less shallow and they'd be less about reality TV and more about having an experience and feeling their energetic body and interacting with energetic things around them. It's kind of like they're holding it back from us. You know what I mean? Like, because to develop that technology, you have to know a lot about the human electromagnetic field for you to interact with something like that. So why are they keeping that, do you think? Why do you think that it's still not out? The closest we have now is a virtual reality, or Elon Musk talking about the chip in your brain and all that.
Yeah, and I think the CIA knows a lot more than it lets on. In fact, the study of the human mind is part of CIA's research. And by extension, the Office of Director of National Intelligence at the DNI level, there's an office that is the equivalent of DARPA, which we all have heard of. And it's the intelligence. Yes. The I, instead of defense, stands for intelligence. And they've done a lot of work with the brain and the mind and consciousness. And so people don't realize that, in the intelligence world, especially CIA, it's not just about what are the Russians up to. It's about who are we and why are we here? I mean, we study paranormal, we study the metaphysical, and that's a lot of what Kit Green did. And in fact, it was Jim Simivan who said, that he worked in the office dealing with the paranormal, the paranormal office, which was the life sciences division I keep telling people about.
Yes, you've been talking about that for.
And so that is not classified. That is out in open source. If you know where to look, life sciences division. I knew that division existed, and just do a Google search for it. It came up. And Annie Jacobson wrote a book called The Phenomenon, and in it she referenced Kit Green by name with life sciences division by name, and the fact that they did work with these types of esoteric phenomena. So that's not unusual. And so Jim Simivan kind of hinted at that as well. And I hinted at that, it's not just like Russian missiles.
No.
So
and people laughed at the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon book, but it might just sound so fantastical to, I don't want to say like the average mind, but it's people that think that are in a box. They're like, this is how the world works. This is how science works. This is the nuts and bolts. This is what the nuts and bolts are made of. And they know everything, right? So when they read something like, they hear something like what you just said and read something like Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, they're obviously going to think like this is too out there. It's too weird. It's too whatever else they say, you know? And it's limiting the whole planet when people think
Right.
like that.
And that's why CIA exists. I mean, Jim Sinvan himself said that we cover everything in the world. We cover everything, and that's true. I mean, you name any issue in the world, whether it's natural resources, climate change, clean water, migration patterns of humans,
That's so
social
fascinating. Yeah.
interactions between humans, what causes conflict. That is in the purview of CIA to understand why does one group of people why do people fight each other?
They know more about us than some of us know about ourselves, and it's
Mm,
just, they're not telling anybody about it.
and it
Um,
goes to the policymakers. I mean,
yeah.
CIA doesn't do this on its own. We
No,
are
that they're
tasked
telling
by
yeah.
policymakers. We want to know the answers, and so we task the answers out, to our assets through technical means, through human means, all these ways that CIA interfaces with the world, and we get the answers and provide it to the policymakers. It's up to them to decide what they're going to do with that information.
Right.
We don't tell them.
Yeah.
So I tell
And some
people, if you
people
go ahead.
I say some people say, like, "Just tell us," but then some people will throw back to, like, "Well, we can't even handle, the knowledge of a pandemic without acting
Right.
ridiculous." So it's every and I feel like both sides are right. There's some of us that would be relieved to know that
Hmm.
so much of that is being studied because a lot of us are experiencing, um, not just UFO phenomenon, but other phenomenon like, poltergeist activity,
Hmm.
spirits, other beings that aren't they don't seem like they're from outer space,
Hmm.
or even from another dimension. So, um, it's just I mean, it's good they're studying it, but it's not helping
Yeah.
anybody when the policymakers keep it, and they're
Right.
not about I understand that a lot of it could be, like national security. I get that, my
Yeah.
husband's military. I want everybody to stay out of wars and stay safe, and I get it. But, it's just when they know something about the human, such as like our migration patterns, where did we come from? Are we hybrids, from these other beings? Which is, she says, um, Walker Dale in the chat says, do you think humans are like a science project for a creator species, or do they want to evolve us into them?
Well, what I believe, this is personal, like belief. Um, what I believe is that the creation stories in these ancient texts, whether it be Genesis or the Sumerian creation story, what it involves is a divine being or divine beings or higher intelligences having some intervention in the way we evolved. And so, for whatever reason, whether if you believe in the Sumerian story, it's because they needed workers. And so they found these primitive beings on Earth and said, well, let's impart some of our DNA into them so that we can function with them and talk to them, and they can do work for us. Let's elevate their intelligence so they can do work for us. And
Mhm.
perhaps there were another faction of these other beings that wanted us to become more elevated. You're not just workers. What you have in you is our intelligence, and what you are a divine being just like we are, and you don't want to be worshipped like this other faction of ours. We want you to accelerate and realize your full potential. Maybe that caused the conflict way back when. And so that explains a lot of these ancient stories, these stories of wars amongst the gods. The battle between God and Satan, for example, could be an allegory of that occurring. So I don't believe that that we necessarily are like beholden to them. I think they gave us the means to realize our own destiny. We have free will, and the fact that we don't need to be subservient to break away from that
Right.
subservience. And I think that's a key feature that occurred, but it got kind of muddied That story, I think the ancient peoples were more knowledgeable about their origin than we are today, because what we know today has been filtered by Western religion or religion in general, trying to frame the true story amongst these other stories that they imposed on us. And so, Genesis, they say, it's not that old. It's a retelling and a retelling and a retelling and a retelling of an older story. And if you go back to the Sumerian text,
Yes.
that might have been a retelling of a more ancient story.
Yeah, and
So
a lot of
we
people think
don't
that.
have a lot of that. And unfortunately, the library in Alexandria, Egypt, so what I hear, it was the repository of the world's knowledge, was
Yes.
burnt to the ground. And we lost a lot of knowledge from that, but it was preserved in the mystery schools that they taught to their followers more of the real story. Maybe the Essene movement was part of
Yeah.
that, where they taught the real knowledge of
Yeah.
our potential. So that's a long-winded answer, but
I don't think it is. I think that you condensed all of that nicely, honestly. When people actually research this, ancient civilizations and what they actually knew, there's things that were written about in ancient Sumeria that, you know, how would they know that? And then we have, if you take just the Sumerian creation story, it kind of is told that way in different parts of the world too.
mhm,
So why people think that two things are happening, like, we may have forgotten about, some of the stuff we knew how to do, like some of the spirituality stuff, like what we are, who we are.
mhm,
It's been polluted by, technology is a blessing, 'cause here I am talking to you and seeing all these people and interacting with all these like-minded people. But and, we're able to get information super fast and everything's so fast, but at the other end of it, how much of technology is hindering us, everything from chemicals that are, we can't get rid of, that are in our drinking water,
mhm,
to, different weird frequencies that maybe the human we're so sensitive to, like, almost like, fluorescent lights, you know what I
mhm,
mean? So, I just feel like we knew so much because we trusted, ourself as divine beings and having a
mhm.
connection to these creators, and then the whole other, like you said, like, the I don't even know how to put it because people are like, "Well, don't say negative, don't say bad." I say naughty because it's kind of, like, funny. The naughty beings came and wanted to take control, and that's unfortunately sometimes the loudest, strongest message gets through even if it's not the
Mhm,
right one, so the control, the, the the separation between the human and its source, which isn't real. There's no separation, there's no middleman, you know?
mhm,
So, it's just strange that people are starting to, people say it all the time, "They're starting to wake up, we're starting to wake up." So yeah, it's interesting to look back, and like you said, James says the 7 Essene mirrors, it's knowledge. It's knowledge
mhm,
that people think is just a story.
mhm.
My goodness, like, years and years from now, if we don't get our heads out of our rears, we're gonna think Kim Kardashian's story is gonna be legend and lore, and they're
Oh
gonna be like, "There
no.
was this one goddess that ruled the planet," you know?
And her name was Priscilla.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, you make a great point, Priscilla. Gosh, it's we forgot more than we remember, and I'm kind of hoping that their appearance now is at a precipice when we finally can destroy ourselves with that technology. That we have discovered the secret of the atom, which was theorized by the Greeks before they even knew there
Right.
was such a thing as atoms.
I wish
That
I could be
they,
a fly on the wall in ancient Greece just listening to those guys talk, all the,
mhm,
um,
yeah, and
philosophers and scientists. How did they know? Do you know what I mean?
exactly. And so, what do we do with this technology? We weaponized it and
We
created
did.
a destructive force, and we still have that destructive force everywhere. And so, the potential, especially now with the tensions in the world, but
Oh,
not to get political, but gosh
yeah.
darn.
We're in a political world,
Ooh,
trust me. You know,
yeah, sending troops to
oh,
Europe
yeah.
to stage them in case
Yeah.
as a counter to Russian troops on the Ukraine border. I mean, I've seen that happen so many times as a run up to conflict by the
Oh,
United States, where we didn't intend that conflict, but because of what we did, it led to it. So it's this big, huge game of risk that they're playing with dice. But the policymakers should realize when they play this game of risk that we are affected by that. That the decisions they make, they should realize that they should have the world's um, benefit in their mind. That what they're doing could have an unintended impact. So that's
they
what
don't
worries
think
me.
that far, though. People don't
Well,
think that far
well, it's
sometimes.
amazing because CIA reporting um, actually provides policymakers with many policy decisions they can take. They're called policy levers, and every time they pull a lever, we tell them, based on best analysis of all the information we have, these are the intended consequences and unintended consequences of doing that. So,
Yeah.
can you live with the unintended consequences? Decision A, B, C, and D. So we don't tell them which one to pull. We leave that up to the policymakers. And
Oh,
I tell people, if you don't like what CIA is doing, and there's always this backstory about how evil we are and what we did to the
no.
world and all of that. A lot of that happened.
It
But
goes
then I
back to
say,
just, like, doing your job almost.
well, what I tell them is that if you didn't like what CIA did, or you don't like what CIA is doing now, who's in charge? Who's sitting in the White House? We work for the President of the United States, whoever he or she might be. The
Mm.
President of the United States is our customer, and we provide the President with the best intelligence that we can provide at the time. And the billions of dollars we spent, upwards of $90 billion to provide this intelligence with everything that we do in the intelligence community. And so here are the decisions that you can make,
Right.
make good use of what we invested in. And so if you don't like what we're doing, look at who's sitting in the Oval Office, and
Oh,
maybe that's the
absolutely.
reason.
And a lot of people do think that. I think more people are super quick to blame whoever's in office. But in our community, there's so much, people don't trust the CIA. And I try to look at it, like outside of myself sometimes and just say like everybody is doing what they're told to do. And when you're in the military or when you're in the CIA, you're trained to do your job. And even if it's going to upset people, or like your job is just to not say anything. Even
Mhm.
if like, it's a technology, or you learned something that could benefit the world. First of all, who would listen? Because the people that are talking to the CIA, like, look at the scrutiny you've had. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so say some CIA guy comes out, says, "There's free energy and this is how it works." People are still not gonna believe it. So,
Mhm.
it's a tough thing to you can't blame any one agency, I don't think. You know what I mean? Because everybody's kind of hoarding their information to begin with. It's a collective thing that needs to happen, the sharing of information.
Mhm.
And you even mentioned this in your slides with like the whole 9/11 situation. Like that could have been, the sharing of information has only the lack of sharing information has only hurt us as a country and as a world. But you're right, we use some of this knowledge to hurt others, and I can't remember learning about how we were just throwing nukes up in space and throwing them in the water,
Mhm.
and that's the water, it's the ocean. Like, I remember thinking, like, "How can you do that? It's the ocean." Like, you're
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
setting nukes off in the ocean. Like, we know energy cannot be created, it just goes somewhere else. So why are we doing this, especially with radioactive energy? Like, that we don't even know the effects of some of it. So, of course, James has another great question, and I mean that in a good way, James. That it wasn't like, "Oh my god, James," I mean it in a good way. Has John ever been initiated into any of the mystery schools, or did he do work with Merkaba or Flower of Life work?
No, I have not been initiated in any of the mystery schools. What I know about the Merkaba was from my light workers and
Okay.
working with them. And so um, I've I've always wanted to meet Drevell
Me
Melchizedek.
too.
I
Yeah.
do. He used to live in Sedona, Arizona. I don't know if he's still there,
Oh my gosh, I would love
but
to
by
talk to them.
oh my gosh, because I put that in his slide. He wrote a book, Living in the Heart. Was it Living in the Heart? I forget the title. Shame on me. It was in my slide.
You just need to
Um,
make a reading list for
yeah,
all of us weirdos.
and he wrote about this Air Force major telling him that the Air Force satellites can see the Makabe field being generated by humans, and they were worried about it, but then they realized it was just part of this greater consciousness, higher consciousness taking over the Earth. And that, to me, is a profound statement from an Air Force officer.
Right.
And I wish I could talk to him more about it. How did he meet the Air Force officer, or how did the Air Force officer contacted him, and what scenario that he had this conversation. But things like that are hard to prove. And, I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's
And
like,
nobody wants to listen without the proof. You have to
yeah,
you have to have
yeah,
an experience, and
yeah.
even when you have the experience, it's like, what is wrong with me? What just happened? Like, you automatically start doubting yourself when you experience something extreme or different or paranormal. So yeah, I feel like people are just, I think that people limit themselves, when they only think one way. But I'm willing to listen to people's proof, and I'm willing to listen to people's, spirituality or occult studies, anything really. I find it all interesting. Um, that we have all these like energetic things happening. But that brings me to a question, the orbs. And don't worry, everybody, I'm gonna take the last couple of minutes for questions because I see Eve has another question. But it's gonna take us in another direction. So I'm gonna ask this first, and then I'll get to your question. Um, the orbs. You've
Hmm.
mentioned the orbs, and I've wondered about them because so many people have experienced orbs, and some people claim to have like interacted with the orb and then being shown who's inside of it or
Hmm.
what's inside of it. I think it's a who, but um, that's up to whatever people. I don't know if they identify as a who or maybe they're above the whole. I identify as this and that, but yeah. So what is up with the orbs? What do you think is happening, and why do people see that? I feel like people see that more than like the metallic ships or even like Tic Tac cigar. Like, people see these orbs during the daytime. Sometimes people are filming. Like, I remember one day I did a meditation to initiate contact, and I had my little iPhone up to the sky, and I was looking, or my iPad up, and I could see something moving around, but I couldn't see it with my eyes, but I could see it in the screen, and sometimes it's vice versa. So what do you think the orbs are doing? What are they here for, or what is their purpose, or have you had any experience with them?
Yes, I have personal experiences with them. Let me start with the professional experience. We detected orbs, and I can say this now, we detected orbs from space, from some of our NRO platforms. We had sensors that can look into the infrared region. And these sensors originally rode on another type of satellite that didn't collect this type of infrared. But when we built a satellite, real briefly, I won't get too much into the details, but when we build a satellite, we build it for a certain purpose, and it might be more space on that satellite to put other capabilities. And as long as we can provide power and space for that other capability, that payload might be inserted into the satellite, which is doing something else as a primary mission, and this could be a secondary mission. So one of those satellites actually detected this light energy. And so when you see this light energy, the first thing that comes to mind is that, okay, something is broke, because what
Right.
is this? And so that's what's launched an investigation into it. And when we actually built a satellite where the primary mission was infrared, electro-optical infrared. And I can now say this because the 60th anniversary NRO brochure said, yes, we have a KH-11 Keenan, and yes, it's an electro-optical satellite that we fly, NRO flies. Okay, so that type of platform um, is more of a scientific collector. It can actually measure energies, radiance, and other capabilities more technically about the orb. So they're basically energy. They're just energy As
Right.
far as seeing anything into them, I don't remember that anyone said, "Oh my gosh, there's something inside these orbs," but it's
Right.
just balls of energy, spheres of energy that tend to like form together, like in a
Yes.
formation,
Yes.
uh, going to some place with intent. So you would think they're intelligently controlled. So
Right.
that's from the technical side. Now, from the personal experience side, people have seen things in these orbs when they come close to them.
Mhm.
My understanding is that I think Chris Bledsoe, maybe his son Ryan, they saw one of their pet dogs who was deceased
Oh,
in the orb.
yeah.
Now, does that mean that the orb is a manifestation of the dog's spirit? Or is it because the orb wants to communicate with you? It
Right.
knows it knows what you're thinking about or what's
Right.
on your mind, and it reflects back.
Yeah, like, "I'm a friend. Your dog was a friend. I'm a friend." You know,
Yeah,
like, in our
something
if
like
that's
that. It's a way of communicating. And so that's my personal belief. I've not seen an orb close up.
Right.
And prior to going to Sedona, Arizona with Melinda Leslie and her UFO sighting tour, I've only seen like 2 orbs in my
Right.
life, other than the one I was presented to me professionally. So there's 2 personal orbs in my life. And in the first case, it was from an airplane where the pilot reported to the ground that there's this orange sphere
Mm.
coming across in front of his flight path, going from his left side to the right side. I was sitting on the right side of the plane. I was monitoring Channel 1, United Airlines. They used to, before 9/11, allow you to hear the communications between the cockpit and the ground air
Oh,
traffic control.
interesting.
So I opened up my screen. I think maybe it was already open, and there it was, an orange orb. And it kept pace with us. It didn't just zoom away, it kept pace with us. And then it slowly receded away. And it wasn't like it was shiny, or
Right.
it wasn't like it was like a flame or anything. It was just like someone went to Michael's and got orange construction paper, very, very bright, and cut out a circle. It was just there. It wasn't like flashing. So I know it's not an
Right.
afterburner of a jet
Interesting.
aircraft or anything like that. And so happened the synchronicity with this. I was sitting next to my colleague, a CIA officer. We paid for our own ticket on the plane, own hotel rooms and conference fees to go to a UFO conference in Irvine, California. So I was going to a UFO conference, and here I see this like orb.
Yeah.
And so that was the synchronicity. And I didn't get any message from it, other than, wow, that's one of those things. There it is.
Yeah.
And he was asleep. So I
Oh,
didn't have a
man.
witness there, but I have the pilot. Um, and the second orb I saw was at a distance over the Santa Catalina Mountains here in Tucson, where we did this CE6 meditation with Mark Sims. He uses
Oh,
radios to send a signal out,
yeah.
and then he tones HU, who, or Hugh. And a few minutes later, looking up, both my wife and I saw this. I saw it straight ahead, and she saw it to her right side. So she saw something, but she should have seen it to her left because she's seated
Oh,
on my right. And so if she was looking at it, she would have seen it
that's so
from
strange.
her left, but she didn't see that. And I saw it. And that's when I got the message on July 14th, 2020, which was my birthday, that I have information to share, and it's time for you to share it. And you
Oh,
need to
wow.
help someone. There's someone out there who's searching for your help. And so here I am sharing my experiences with you, um, with everyone who tunes in to my interviews. And I have met the person that I was supposed to work with,
Oh,
and I'm working
wow.
with him now. Just
Wow.
sharing experiences, and that's what I love doing more than like talking about craft and bodies.
Yeah.
And
There's
I like,
people working on that. There's people working on that. There's,
yeah,
we've
and
got an office now. Like, people are gonna work on that.
yeah,
We got
yeah, but
telescopes, crazy telescopes going up. Like,
right, but no one's working
we
on
need to
the
take care of the human. We need to take care of,
exactly.
our fellow humans. And
Yeah,
I think people like us, like, we could go that route, especially you. Like, I'm sure you know so much that, you can't even talk about. So, but at the same time, like, is all the knowledge in the world gonna help if you're just collecting materials without understanding it or understanding the why behind it. There's people doing that. So I'm glad that you're comfortable with just putting your message out there and then being there for other people as well. And I'm glad that you found that person. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's what I want to do. I mean, there would be a time when I would love to stop talking about what we're talking about and just helping people and helping them find resources, because I know some people have some disturbing aspects to the
Mhm.
phenomenon, and
Yeah.
they are seeking answers. And I'm not a therapist, but I can direct them to resources.
Right.
And so I like doing that type of work more so than just, I don't care how they fly or who's driving them as
Mhm.
much. I do care why they're here and what the message is to us. And it seems more like the need to be better custodians of this planet, because it is highly fragile and we can destroy it in a heartbeat by making the wrong human
Oh, yeah.
decision. And so to me, that's more important than the nuts. I'll use the word nuts and bolts. They don't have nuts and bolts of the appearance to us. So just about everyone who's seen an orb, their lives are transformed in some way, and mostly positive. That when people see orbs, they all of a sudden become interested in this entire phenomenon and try to seek meaning, personal meaning for their own lives. But they're in a situation, family, friends, or work, where they can't share it. It really tears
Yeah.
at them. And so I would like to. I think what uh, Stuart and Jay are doing with the Experiencers Group is valuable. There need to
Yeah.
be more Experiencers groups out there who are welcoming and not judgmental, but sharing what our experiences
Mhm.
are like, whether they may be good or bad. People need to talk about this. And
Absolutely.
yeah, like you said, let the scientists and physicists do their thing.
Yeah.
But
And
for
people,
us, yeah, we need to talk and share.
absolutely. And sometimes that's all people need is to just talk about it, just hearing what you said right now, I was like, "Oh crap, I'm gonna start crying," because it's real. Like, I try to explain to people, like, when I saw those orbs when I was young, they were sentient, they were giving me a vibe, and from that point on, I was a weirdo, and I researched every religion since once I started being able to read. I every book I could find, anything, anybody I could ask, every all of it, and already having a paranormal activity in the house because my grandma, being a medium, was like I was already open to that world, and I was very aware of angels and demons
Mhm.
and spirits, but this was something else. It was that it was a like, it opened my mind in a different way. Like, how can you ever see anything as mundane as some people see it, ever again? So, it does change people's lives. So we're coming up on the hour and a half. Do you have time for a couple of questions?
Sure, absolutely. I'm
Okay,
here whenever,
awesome,
however.
awesome. So this is from Eve Clancy. She says, "Has John heard what Ross Coulthart has said about what high U.S. officials have told him about ETs being from the future, and does he have an opinion about that?"
I have heard that story, in fact, not officially, but just through my own research and trying to put the answer together for myself, that they could be manifestations of either us from the future or um, an intelligence who's able to transverse the temporal plane. And when you just can't go through time without affecting space.
Right.
And when you affect time and space, the way you bend time and space is not anti-gravity, but lots of gravity. When you have like a highly dense singularity of gravity, of mass, all of a sudden space and time gets bent. And so some aspects of people encountering these craft um, involves like a time displacement.
Yes.
They're missing time. And it could be and I'm not a physicist by any means, I'm a political scientist, but it could be a manifestation of some type of propulsion system that does the bending of time and space
Mm.
to be here. And so um, I've not heard from any U.S. government official about the time aspect. But if they are studying that, that just tells you something, that nothing, nothing is being eliminated off the table. They are looking at every possibility to explain the phenomenon. So to the government, nothing is outrageously, impossible. It's their job to look at the impossible to see if there's any possibilities in that.
Yeah.
So no, I haven't personally heard that, and I'm the worst read person in ufology. I have not read Ross's book. I need to do that. I'm working on another book now by Jason Reza Georgiani. He wrote a book called Closer Encounters,
Oh,
and he was
interesting.
trying to put together the entire story. And I believe he was interviewed by Nikiana Jones several
Okay.
times to try and explain what he believed was happening. And all of these possibilities are valid to me because no one has the real answer.
Absolutely.
And Jim Simivan himself said, hey, we don't have the real answer. We got a lot of answers, and some of them are classified. But the full breadth of the phenomenon includes the disturbing aspects, like at Skinwalker, the
Right.
astral celestial aspects of Pleiadians and Octurans and Lyres, and then there's like the Nordics who are like us,
Yeah.
and other corporeal beings like Anjali has encounters with the mantis. I've had
Yeah.
encounters with more of the what I call saurian or reptilian type
Mm.
beings. So there's a full gamut of the experience
Yeah.
that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and I only made that face because the mantid thing always, like, weirds me out, because I seen a hologram. The first, like, awake sighting of a being that I had was of this mantid-looking head. I didn't
Hmm.
notice the body because I was just, like, zeroed in on the face,
Hmm.
but it almost looked like a hologram, so I'm
Hmm.
like, did it send me one of its holograms, or did it not wanna come
Hmm.
visit in person? Like, is that what it is? Does it look like that? Is it some sort of weird light being that looks like a hologram to me, and then it, is physical to some people and not to others? So, I just don't understand the whole mantis, uh, um, thing, but a lot of people see them.
Hmm.
This is an interesting, question. When you guys meet people, can you tell if they are experiencers without being told they are experiencers? I definitely notice, like, when I meet somebody that's an experiencer, I automatically get along with them, but because of the open-mindedness that experiencers have, but I'm not gonna be like, "Oh, wow, you like to study ancient religions too. Have you ever been abducted?" Like, like, so
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. I know that they've had experiences with other beings, and to me, when people start talking about spirit guides and, light beings and all that stuff, I'm like, "You've probably been abducted," like, in my head, like, "You've
Hmm.
probably."
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but what about you? Do you kinda get, like, a little ping when you meet another experiencer?
I get what I call I feel like an aura of energy around me, not with experiences, but with light workers.
Yeah.
So if I know someone is a light worker, I know it because I have this feeling of this aura around me and an aura around them. And I feel an instant affinity
Yes,
to that
yes.
person.
That makes
But I've
sense.
not had that with experiences per se.
Okay. And
But
I feel that, yeah.
yeah, but in the communities where I meet experiencers, um, for example, I was a member of Cosmic Empowerment, a meetup in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was a member of that, and there were experiencers there. I just knew there were experiencers. I mean, you don't go to something like Cosmic Empowerment and talk about this phenomenon without, bringing something of that experience with you. And so I knew there were experiencers there, but what I felt were the two light workers that were there. I knew exactly who they were,
Oh, wow.
and I mentioned that they were light workers, and they were surprised. And
That
so,
makes sense. Because people
yeah.
ask me if I can see auras, I'm I get, like, I know what color their aura is, or I know what their aura is saying, or what it's it's like, I know what it's I can't I don't it's not saying anything, obviously, but I just know what
Hmm.
it means.
Hmm.
And I'll get, like, a color will pop into my head, but I don't see them, like, visually, but with other healers and light workers,
Hmm.
I see like a white thing around them, and like you said, an instant affinity for them.
Hmm.
Like you meet somebody else that you know they're a healer, whether they're an experiencer or not. They've experienced something, they're a healer, and you're
Hmm.
like, I just love this person. Like I don't even know why, but I just automatically have this like respect and love for this person. So I hope that answers your question, Walker. Sorry, I forgot. Sorry. I was reading another one and trying to talk. So, um, another question from Rachel says, and welcome back, Rachel. Thank you so much for, coming again. A question for John. What are John's thoughts about the Bledsoe encounters? More specifically, is he familiar with the lady and the healing techniques using frequencies?
So I am familiar with the encounters with the lady. My wife had an encounter. She was not the white lady, but a lady in blue, the blue lady. And a coworker of mine at CIA had several encounters with a white lady. His name is Michael. He let me use his name. He's retired now, and he's an experiencer. And he experienced the white lady, much like the Bledsoe's experience the white lady. And there
Yeah.
was a message conveyed to him, and the message was, um, uh, it wasn't like a cataclysm, but something profound might be occurring. And he had the date 2026. That
Wow.
something profound might be occurring in 2026, so it'll cause a shift um, in our world. It's not like a physical, magnetic pole shift,
Yeah.
but a shift in consciousness. It's an upgrade for all of us to go to higher consciousness, and that some folks may be left behind, but not separated. It's not like the rapture
Yeah.
in Christian theology. It's that like we'll be on this world, and all of a sudden we realize that hey, this is the world I've always wanted. It's so lovely here. It's full of peace now, full of love.
Yes.
All these conflicts have been like have passed away, and the other world will still be in what we're experiencing now, turmoil and conflict, like that, and that they wouldn't know that they shifted, and we would feel like it was just a natural progression.
Yeah.
That's the message he got.
That
That
makes
there's
sense
there's a
too.
path there going both ways. I didn't get the first part of that question, but I answered the
I
part
think it was
about the white
about
lady.
Bledsoe. Are
Yes.
you
Oh, yes.
okay?
Thank
Are
you.
you, what are your thoughts about the Bledsoe
Well,
encounters?
I was offered to be introduced to the Bledsoes through the person we know in common, and that's Jim Simivan. But I would love to talk to them, but I have not met them.
Yeah, they seem very interesting. I love their podcast. Like they're funny, but then they talk about serious things and make light humor of it,
Yeah.
and just the whole story about it. Just their story is just very interesting and compelling because the way it's happened to like the whole family, and that's another commonality too that with experiencers. I wish
Hmm.
my grandma was still alive because with all her experiences with the spirit world, I want to ask her, you know, um, have you ever seen, like the UFO question? But when I saw mine, when I had my experience and came back and told my grandpa, he was just like, "You're not supposed to be outside." Like he totally ignored. Like he
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
he was gonna get in trouble because he was the one sleeping on the couch that should have heard me sneaking out to go outside to look at the sky.
Hmm. Hmm.
So he thought he was gonna get in trouble and was like basically didn't listen to anything I said. um Yeah, it seems like, I like that so many people have different questions tonight for you, um, because it kind of is like, it's letting I feel like it's not so, like, rigid, like,
Hmm.
as some other questions people have had. So, this is one about your decor. So we've talked about everything tonight, guys, from, The Cure and 80s music to, his decorations. Uh Is there any significance about the wolf over your shoulder, on your wall?
Well, there in the Southwest, especially in Arizona, southern Arizona, we have coyotes, and that is a coyote.
Mm.
And when you see coyotes at night, first of all, if you see a coyote at night, I wouldn't go there. But coyotes are known to arch their necks up toward the sky and howl or yip. They actually yip.
Oh, yeah, it's super
With the
weird
yip,
sound
yip,
when you
yip, yip,
first hear it.
as you know, having lived in Arizona. So that is a coyote, and it's just one of the decorative things we have. The other is cocopelli. You probably have seen cocopellis around. It's
Oh my gosh,
a
Coca-Cola
person,
everywhere
yeah,
out there.
playing a flute with an arch back, playing a flute,
Yeah,
and it's part of the Hopi culture. Cocopelli, having led the Hopi people um, to their home.
it's
They
interesting that
followed Cocopelli and his flute playing. It's I guess it's sort of like the Pied Piper in a way, you
it
know, that is part
it
of their
make
culture.
there's a lot of stories like that though in Native tradition. Like my dad's the tribe in Arizona called Tohono O'odham, there's a being called Iotoi, and he
Hmm.
led people out of the sacred mountain, and
Yeah,
that's where we came from, basically, out of the
right.
earth.
And
So,
I have a story about that real quick. Um, so one of my beliefs that I've been researching was Atlantis, and the other was another civilization coexisting with Atlantis called Lemuria.
yes.
Whereas Atlanteans seem to have been very rigid in their outlook. They're not militaristic, but very rigid, not very flexible in their outlook. They were highly technological. And the Lemurians were
Mm,
more spiritual.
I have heard this,
And the
yes.
Atlanteans were a patriarchal society. The Lemurians were matriarchal. And that and come out through QHHT sessions by various practitioners that seems to be a common story about the Lemurians having something called the red crystal that had healing properties, and the Atlanteans having some kind of virus, and they wanted to get this crystal. And
Oh,
in order to
wow.
get the crystal, the Atlanteans then practically destroyed the Lemurians, and the Lemurians had to hide from the Atlanteans. And the Atlanteans later, you know, uh, evolved into like what we are today, kind of a very a rigid patriarchal
Mm,
society, very technologically oriented, whereas the Lemurians were more spiritually oriented. And so when the Lemurians scattered through East Asia and down the land bridge to the Bering Straits and into Latin America and in Polynesia, their outlook was more spiritual.
yes.
And that's why, like you said, the Tohono O'odham tribe and other stories from our indigenous native peoples, they're more tuned into nature. They have more affinity toward understanding the divinity of everything in nature, whereas the Atlanteans were more like nuts and bolts weapons,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that we were more influenced by Atlanteans, and the Lemurians are more on the Western Hemisphere and the indigenous populations. So that's one of the theories, hypotheses about our origins and what it might have been ancient civilizations here. But if you look at Sarah Brexman Cosme was a QHHT level 3 practitioner who works with uh, Julia, the daughter of Dolores Cannon. And together, when they do these QHHT sessions with clients, they come up with the same story. People who have absolutely no background, no knowledge, no interest in UFOs, UAPs, or ancient civilizations under QHHT, they've been telling the exact same story. And she shared this story at the Star Works USA conference that I attended, sponsored by Jack Valet and Paula Harris.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's so amazing that there was this common story that is sort of like part of our makeup, or the hidden history that gets passed on through maybe various incarnations that we have
Right.
about this story. And to me, it makes a lot of sense
Yeah,
of the
definitely.
the Eastern way of thinking, the Eastern religion's way, and plus the more dogmatic Western religion way of thinking.
Absolutely. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I've heard similar things about the two civilizations. But guys, I'm sorry if I'm not going to get to everybody's questions tonight. Because we are coming up on like almost an hour and 40 minutes. I saw a question. Um, We'll do one more if that's okay.
That's fine. I'm here as long as you want me.
Oh, okay. I feel like people are asking you questions they wanted to ask you. Where did it go? I think it was Marco's question. Okay, question from, let me just put it up. Question from Crypto's Conundrum. What are the things that stand out the most? Do you mean like in general, or can you clarify the question for me, or do you understand what he's saying?
Yes, I'll just give a brief rundown of my take on Crypto's Conundrum. First of all, you have
Okay.
to realize that it is fiction. It's a fictionalized account
Oh,
written
okay, the
by
book. All right. Never mind.
Chase Brandon. He saw the actual files of Roswell in the Historical Intelligence Collection. And based on what he saw, he confirmed that there was a craft and there were non-human bodies recovered from that craft. And the CIA knows about it. That's the core of the story. What he did was when he investigated it and when he had researched it for himself, it's an informed research, but he had to cast it into a fictional form. What he did was pretty much confirm what I've said about Atlanteans, that the Atlanteans may have had some input into the way we turned out, and that humans are more recent, and the phenomenon we're seeing, the beings that are here trying to interact with us, have been here a lot longer than humans have, and there may have been conflicts among them. And the humans evolved, and certain humans were selected from way back, like long time ago, like tens of thousands of years ago. And I don't know if the word seeded is right, but certain humans were more elevated in their DNA than other humans. And that this elevation of DNA, as it goes from generation to generation, they were more tuned in to the phenomenon, and they were receiving messages from the phenomenon. So his main character, Dr. Jonathan Chalmers, a CIA officer, was receiving messages because he was part of that bloodline of enhanced humans from way back in his generations. And that he realized, Dr. Chalmers did in the book, that there was this like possible cataclysm that might happen on the earth, and he wanted to prepare the earth for it. Now, more on the phenomenon side of UAPs, keeping in mind that Chase Brandon retired in 2006, I believe, and he wrote the book probably starting in 2010 and finished it in 2012. He said that you need to look under the water, into the seas, because that's where the craft are. They go into the sea and they come out of the sea. They fly in our air and they go back into the sea. He said the key to understanding what we're seeing is to look under the water, and the government knows what's under the water. And so that was the big takeaway for me, that he understood there were such things as USOs under the water, and that's what we're really seeing. And he also wrote, long before anyone knew about the USS Princeton and Nimitz and the FA-18s, he wrote about, and his narrative, he wrote about an earlier time in the 50s where there's an aircraft carrier with planes that encountered these craft. And so he had knowledge of what was really going on, but he had to cast it into a way that could make the CIA approved. Okay. So his book was completely approved by CIA, and he told the story behind the story. And on Coast to Coast AM, he said, it's all in there. It's fiction, but it's all in there. You have to read not between the lines, but behind the lines. And he said in 2012, in his interview with George Noory, it will come out. This story cannot be contained. It will come out. And here we are in 2022.
Yeah, I have that book. I just haven't read it. So it's like, it's in my stack of, I want to read this. You know what I mean? So now I feel like I have to read it because it sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah, but you keep in mind, it's fiction.
Oh,
there's no, I would give one thing away. There's no underground tunnel underneath CIA. There's no train system underneath CIA in a tunnel.
So many,
I've been down in the basement down there. There's no tunnel there. But
Yeah, I live
the
near
other
Fort
things,
Knox, and people are like, there's tunnels
yeah.
under Fort Knox."
And the other thing is that the dates for Roswell, he used the Gregorian calendar. So,
Oh,
hey, I thought
interesting.
Roswell in July, but he wrote it in June because he had to use the Gregorian calendar.
That's very clever.
Yes, because then, see, he can write about Roswell in a fictional form. He can tell you what
Yes,
happened at
yes.
Roswell, but not use the actual dates. So
That's
CIA
really
says, okay, it's
interesting.
fiction. You can say whatever you want about Roswell from what you discovered, but since you got the dates wrong, that's fine.
Well, now I have to read it because my husband's like, "You don't read any fiction books. Aren't all your books reference books?" I'm like, "Kind of." But I have a fiction book that's just sitting there. See? The Cryptos Conundrum. Um, Spaghetti has a question. Joey is also his name. Has John ever tested his
Oh, yeah.
implant with the RF radio? And you know him, and
Yeah.
perhaps it's emitting signals.
I have not tested my implant with any kind of electronic device. Um, and I don't know if it's emitting signals, but I do know that, like you say, sometimes you can hear it working. I can hear a crinkling sound in my head. One time I
Mm,
woke up with a metallic flapping sound on my right ear, just flapping away. I could actually feel the air move as I was waking up. Something was there, coincident with
mm.
one of my other experiences of encountering these beings in my dreams. There was some flapping, but no, I
That's
haven't. I haven't tested with RF.
Yeah, the dream world and people's dreams, the dreams of experiencers is such a it's another topic that's gets written off, I think. You know what I mean? Because there's
Sure.
dreams where like, yes, I was researching this before bed all day, every day, and I had a dream about it, but it wasn't weird. It didn't feel real because I knew that where it was coming from. And then there's the ones where you have the experience dream and you wake up with either sick or with markings, whatever hives, weird feelings, all this stuff. So that's
Yeah,
another route that I think gets overlooked a
and I go
lot. And
to
then
I go to sleep with listening to, and I think on one of your questioners asked about if I use like listening to frequencies, chakra
oh, okay.
frequencies, and
Sorry, I missed
so
that one.
yeah, like 432 hertz or 528
Mhm.
hertz, these sounds, and also uh, having the binaural experience of having two frequencies very close together. And then the subtraction of those two frequencies are like 2 hertz, 4 hertz, 6 hertz. They're so close together and they kind of resonate with your brainwave frequencies. They're very, very, very low. And
Yeah.
I've had some very vivid dreams from doing that. And so I would say experiences, if you go into a tank, a flotation tank, and remove your physical senses from your experience. And some people do this chemically,
Mhm.
uh, mushrooms or whatever they use. But you're trying to separate your conscious from your inner consciousness. And once you separate your senses, you can have some remarkable
Yes.
experiences.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I do, we did a whole, we would do journey work when I was doing the priestess, it was called Pillars of Priestessing, and, we would do journey work, and when I first started doing it, I was like, I mean, there's certain, incense that you burn that will,
Hmm.
like, sort of trigger kinda like people talk about epigenetics, but I feel like
Hmm.
our soul has an epigenetic or like an epi-soul genetic,
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
the things from last lifetime get triggered in this lifetime, and there's probably, like, a better name for it. Somebody probably knows the term, but, um, it's, like, things like frankincense or blue
Hmm.
lotus,
Hmm.
and actually blue lotus will get you a little you'll have fun with some blue lotus or some buchu leaf, don't listen to me, guys. I'm sorry. I'm not advocating that you go burn these, but a lot of people do they'll like burn bay leaves for their manifestation stuff, and they'll be like, "Oh, I should have opened the window for that because a bay leaf will make you lightheaded too." But it's in a lot of incense that people use for vision questing or
Hmm.
journey work or whatever you want to call it. But you can have these waking experiences when you meditate enough and you can have almost like an astral like I've had like one out like awake I call it like a waking astral travel,
Hmm.
because I was just sitting there meditating, like I was awake. I was sitting up on my meditation pillow, and I had this crazy experience, And when I came back, like, I couldn't, like, walk. It was super
Oh,
weird, and it
wow.
wasn't like nothing was asleep, like, it's a good meditation
Yeah.
pill, like, I've meditated longer than that before,
Mhm.
and nothing's gone to sleep. It wasn't like my foot fell asleep. It was
Yeah.
like there was not a connection in my between my brain and my body for a little bit, and it was actually very scary. So,
Mhm.
you can do it, but, I'm not even gonna say be careful because I think people should try it anyways. There and it wasn't a bad thing, like, obviously, I can walk now and everything connected again,
Mhm.
but it was very strange that it happened. That was the first time it happened without anything, without any medicine or plant medicines or, I think I had solfeggios playing on my noise
Mhm.
canceling headphones, and
Yeah.
that'll do it. I have, like, tuning forks, that my husband makes fun of me for because he, like, walks in and I'll be, like, with this thing, like, just,
Yes.
like this one is a 963 hertz, so it's the upper chakras, but he just, like, shakes his head and walks away. "I'll leave you with that," he says, and
Mhm.
but yeah, I was listening to those. So tones will totally take you somewhere, if you try it.
Yeah, I think music is a healing thing, and, when I lived in Charlotte, I used to go to, like, sound healing, meetings, and, the instrument I loved was the didgeridoo, the Australian
Yeah, those
instrument
are very
played
cool.
by the Aboriginal peoples, and that one just sends me off the planet. I mean, when I hear that, I'm not on the planet anymore. So I think we all tune into certain sounds that resonate with us.
Absolutely. For me, it's the drumming too, because my mentor, she would play a drum, and this was in, like, COVID time, so it was online, pillars of priestessing, and she'd play the drum in a certain way where if you let yourself, you're not here anymore. It feels like everything around you dissolves. So that's the benefit of using sound in your meditations. And it also helps a lot of people that can't just do like a meditation that have that are just starting. Like a lot of people are like, oh well, I can't quiet my mind. Like if you have one that has music or guided or like you said, like a sound resonates with you, it'll get you there. There's a
Mhm.
type of meditation for everybody. You just have to find it. But I think people get turned off because they think that they have to turn off their thoughts completely,
Mhm.
and that's kind of like a misconception. You just gotta let them pass. Like, you're not gonna stop thinking initially, but you just gotta, like, let the thought go by. Like, so people have that, I think it holds them back, but if they incorporate sounds and instruments and different types of musics, then I think that they would get there, they would be able to have these transcendental experiences without the help of other things. Benji, who's awesome, says, "Why are so many of us creative people, musicians, artists, writers, painters, etc., attracted to the phenomena, and why does it seem to seek us out?"
Well, I would say that those in the creative arts probably are more right brain oriented. And so we know the right brain is more about, feelings, visualization, intuition, holistic thinking, arts, imagination. And again, like we were talking about, when you um, isolate your left brain of your sensory physical senses, your consciousness, and go more toward your inner consciousness, your inner self, the linear thinking, the mathematics, the logical thinking, and just being obsessed with facts, they go away. And then you activate those other parts of the brain that are more about feelings and imagination, holistic thinking, arts, and rhythm. And so I think that's the reason why that you're attracted to the phenomenon, because the phenomenon is all about that. It's all about communicating with your inner self, and that's the way they communicate.
Yeah, definitely, and it brings you into, like, a flow state. So I know a guy, named John, actually, and he plays his guitar, and then he ends up um, seeing UFOs, and he
Hmm.
he he has a whole channel, and he talks to them, but he to get into that receptive state, he plays his
Hmm.
guitar because that's his thing. So, I think that it, like, from a very hippie and woo standpoint, it lifts your vibrations to a point where you are more receptive and almost, like, hyper aware, but in a energetic way.
Yeah.
And sometimes physical way, because that's one of my things is, like, you see this being in your room, or you have an experience, or you see a light in the sky that just, like, shakes you for some reason, and you go into this like almost like a panic mode, but or an excitement,
Mhm.
your adrenaline system kicks in, and some people I feel like don't leave that behind, and or it doesn't go all the way back to normal. So they have this like, hypersensitivity and hyper awareness to things around them, and it trickles into like the energetic world because sometimes it's like you can only do so much with your body, right? So yes, oh, okay. This is I think this will be our final question because I feel like we've had so many you've been very generous with your time and I really appreciate it. And we could definitely ask you questions all night. So, um, are you familiar? Rachel, I think is talking about the Tyler from Diana Pasulka's book.
Mhm.
So,
Oh,
do you have any knowledge
well,
about?
like I said, I'm the worst read in ufology, so I have not read American Cosmic. I've heard about Tyler D. I believe he is involved with, ah, no, that's Tim Taylor. Tyler D. Oh, okay. So I have to say, no, I'm not familiar with Tyler D. And I know people know his real name. Um, but frequency healing is pretty much where we're going with what we previously discussed. Um, I think sound is key to understanding some of this phenomenon. Um, and I'm very interested. I believe in frequency healing. I believe in sound healing. There was a woman in Charlotte that I used to, like I said, I used to attend her sound healing therapy sessions. Um, and what really does it for me is like I'm dating myself, but Grateful Dead, they used to play these like hours long. They just go fly out somewhere. They will start a song, and next thing you know, Jerry Garcia's doing magic with his guitar, and I just sit there with my headphones on, and I'm not on the planet anymore. I'm just like I don't know where
Yeah,
I'm at. And so I think music is key, and frequency healing is key. I do
absolutely.
believe that frequency healing can really it might kind of rebalance things in your body.
Yes.
Could uh, if there's DNA that's damaged, it could like attempt to fix that. And so, yeah, I don't know too much about what Tyler D specifically did, but I do believe in frequency healing.
Yeah, same here. And then back to the ancients, those the smaller three pyramids that were of the three different types of granite were supposedly, I guess people say they think that those were sound healing chambers. So that could be we could talk about Egypt for another 2 hours, but
Oh yeah,
um, I'm gonna cut it off now. Hang out for a minute, don't disappear. I'm gonna thank you backstage, and I want to say thank you to everybody that joined in the live chat. I see some new names and I see some people that have been here. So thank you so much. Uh, I put John's Twitter info in the description. Do you have anything else coming up, John? Are you going to be on anything anywhere else that people should follow you?
well, I can say this, and I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying this, that tomorrow I'll be interviewed by John Greenwald for the Black Vault.
Oh, very cool.
And later this month, I will be on stage in Phoenix
Oh,
with the Phoenix
nice.
MUFON organization.
Oh, cool.
It's a on-stage Q&A using my slides as a backdrop.
That's
I gave them my
awesome.
slides and said, just put up any slide you want, and I'll talk about it. So they'll be interviewing me on stage at the Phoenix MUFON.
That would
That's
be really
on
cool.
February 26th. I may have another interview with Calling All Beings
Nice.
with DJ DeMarco. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, they're all the cabbies are awesome people.
Oh, they're fantastic. And so I'm going to take a little break from that afterwards, and because I need to
Okay.
do what I call my day job. The Cold War museums. There are three of them in the country. Cold War societies, organizations, and I'll be doing more briefings related to my actual day job at CIA. And
Very cool.
yeah, and one of them, my brother-in-law, John Welch, he's a co-founder with one of the Cold War museums with Francis Gary Powers Jr. His father was shot down in a U-2. And so I'm doing a presentation for them.
Oh, very cool. I'm sure
And
that that's all interesting as well too. So you have your
yeah,
day job, interesting stuff, and then you have your UFO interesting stuff, and then you have your spiritual interesting stuff, and
Yeah, and do you have astrologers in your community? People
Um,
who follow astrology at all?
I do, but I don't personally know somebody that
Okay.
is, like, astrology
Yeah.
only. I
Okay.
can do people's charts. I do 'em, it takes me a long time because I don't do it a lot. So,
Okay.
I've done people's star charts,
Yeah.
and, like, typed them out. They get, like, a whole report when I do it because it's, like
Sure.
there's a
Well, I'll just
lot.
leave this with you. I'm Sun in Cancer. My ascendant sign is Sagittarius, and I'm my Moon in Leo. And that
You're just
pretty
gonna have to
much,
send me your chart because now I'm curious.
yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah, we'll talk about this because if you want your chart done, I think it'd be
My
fun.
wife is an astrologer. She's done
Oh,
my
is
chart.
she?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Very cool,
yeah. I just
yeah.
want to put that out because a lot of people are wondering, why do you think the way you do? And I believe in astrology, by the way. I do believe in astrology. And if people say, "How do you believe that?" And I go, "Well, it's
It's
about."
because people are used to, like, magazine astrology. They
Oh
only
yeah,
do their
that's
sun
nothing.
sign,
Yeah,
and that's nothing. The sun sign is kinda like your final form, like, it's not gonna resonate because you have to take into account, like you said, sun, moon, rising. And then within your chart, there's the chirons, there's your planetary placements, what house is it in, your north node, your south node. There's a lot more than just like, what's your sign? You know what I mean? So
exactly. Yes, we're 70% water, and the tides on the oceans are affected by the positions of the moon and the sun and all the other celestial bodies pull on that water. And since
right.
we are in an environment uh, within the fluids in our mother's bodies, there's water there too. There's fluid, and it's all affected by the position of these celestial bodies, and that's why astrology works.
Yeah, we'd be silly to
It,
think that it's gonna affect a whole ocean and planet, but not our tiny little
right?
water systems, you
Yeah.
know? Well, yeah, if
Okay.
your wife wanna comes on and talk about astrology, she's always welcome, because I do have different types of people on. Like I have a paranormal guy coming on, I have a demonologist coming up in March. So I talk to a lot of different anything interesting to me, so which is almost everything. So but yes, thank you so much. Thanks to everybody in the chat. I will post like what I have coming up next on Instagram probably tomorrow, the day after. And if you're looking for ways to support the channel, go ahead and give a like, subscribe. There's other ways in the description to support me. And thank you for your time. And if you're listening to audio, thank you so much as well. If you're here in person later, I really, really appreciate everybody and have a great night.